It's nice to see so many kids in the audience because this is your planet, you know? And if we don't take care of it, then it's not going to be good for you. And if you don't take care of it, then your kids are not going to have a great planet to live on. And our speaker today is lead scientist at the Nature Conservatory. He's dedicated his career right now to basically saving our planet and telling us a lot about what the issues that face it. There are a lot of challenges, from the water to the air to the survival of species to global warming, all these kinds of things. And it's really important that the best scientists and the best minds and the best kids understand what's happening to our planet, because you can change it. It's early enough to change the things that we're doing. So with that, let me introduce Sanjayan. Please take it away, sir.
Thanks, Alan. Very kind of you. All right, guys, thank you. And thanks very much for having me out here, particularly John Fitch for being persistent enough to navigate the Nature Conservancy and figure out how to invite us and who to invite. And then Alan Eustace, thank you so much for the introduction. I'm going to just start by playing you a 1-minute video. And if you get bored with my talk, then you just take the video, and that's all you need to do, right? The video just played, you know, Discovery Channel's Big Life series. So this was our public service announcement that played when Life was airing, and it's still playing on television. All right.
Life, an everyday miracle of survival. Today, the future of all life on Earth hangs in the balance. What happens next depends on us.
Well, you done me and you bet I felt it. I tried to beat you, but you're so hot that I melted. I fell right through the cracks. Now I'm trying to get back. Before the cool done run out, I'll be giving it my bestest. And nothing's gonna stop me but divine intervention. I reckon it's again my turn to win some or learn some, but I won't hesitate no more, no more. It cannot wait. I'm yours. Open up your mind and see like me. Open up your plans and damn, you're free. I look into your heart and you'll find that the sky is yours. So please don't, please don't, please don't. There's no need here to complicate, 'cause our time is short. This is our babe. I'm yours.
All right, so now that's all you have to remember, and then you can go away. Well, thanks for having me here again. My name is Sanjayan. I'm the lead scientist for the Nature Conservancy. I have some ties to California. I went to my graduate school here at UC Santa Cruz, and about 8 or 9 years ago, I joined the Nature Conservancy and eventually had this great job where I travel around the world, learn about our projects, and try to bring the best ideas we have in science and in how we do our work to audiences like you around the world. So that's sort of the short version of what I do. Thank you. That one?
That one.
Yeah. She said, don't touch one of these buttons. And that's the only, and immediately then I'm like, okay, which one is that? So I want to start with something a little different. These, does anyone know what these are? What these are called? You know what they are, John?
Yeah, they're Aboriginal dot paintings.
The Aboriginal dot paintings. They're called song lines. And that's exactly right. So the Aboriginal people have this great way of interpreting the world they see around them. And then they put it up in abstract art like this. Now, to us, it looks like art, but to them, it has symbol and meaning. And it's not just a map through space. It's also a map through time. It brings the spiritual and material world together. It has a directionality to it. So some of these round circles, for example, mean water holes. That's the simple explanation. But it would take an Aboriginal person who understands these song lines to really interpret them for you. It's the original version of Google Earth, if you like. So these paintings are found all over Australia, and very recently we started a project in Australia. We started our program there. And our program manager, who's Australian, went out there and he was talking to some Aboriginal people, and he said, well, I'm here, one of the things the Nature Conservancy does is we help you map your environment. We help you place nature within context of your lives. We call it the habitat assessment. So he said, we're here to do this habitat assessment, and these Aboriginal people kind of looked at him kind of funny and said, well, you're a little late because we, sort of already have it. And he pointed up to the wall. And sure enough, they have up there their own interpretation of how they see the planet. And it's just as legitimate as how we see it. So that's sort of my point in telling you this is that for as long as people have been on the planet, they've been interested in mapping the planet and understanding our relationship to it. Okay? So fast forward to today. Today the Nature Conservancy is releasing this new book called The Atlas of Global Conservation. And there's some copies in the back, but it kind of looks like this. And this is the first time I get to hold it up and say, here's where we're releasing it. So Google headquarters here becomes one of the spots that we release this book. So what is the Atlas of Global Conservation? Well, it's basically songlines for planet Earth, just in, Western scientific language. I guess that's the best way to put it. What the Atlas has is a series of maps. Maps that you have never seen before because the data has never been put in one place before. And it's maps of all the habitat types on Earth: coral reefs, freshwater, forests, caves. If you want to find out the best state in the US for caves, if you're really into caves, you can find it out in the Atlas. If you want to find the best caves on the planet, you can find that out in the Atlas as well. If you want to compare how cool those caves are with the caves that you might go to, you can do that on the Atlas as well. And it goes on and on. So all the habitat types on Earth are mapped out there. But also species diversity. What's the best place for freshwater fish? If you're into fly fishing, you can look at the Atlas and you can find out what's the best place for fishing and not tell anyone else. Right, good point. It's been adjusted slightly to keep our best spots secret. But let's say you're interested in wildlife trade or interested in something that's going wrong with the planet, like deforestation or maybe habitat loss. Or you want to find out what's the habitat that's been most impacted by our activities. You can do that on the Atlas as well. It turns out it's grasslands. Grasslands are the habitat type on Earth that are most converted by human activity. Makes sense. Where grass grows, we like to put agriculture, right? So you can do that. This map, for example, is coral reefs. It tells you coral reef diversity. It's a map that you've never seen before because no one has ever pulled that information together in one spot. One of the authors, by the way, of the Atlas, if you're more interested in the Atlas, you can definitely bug her. It's Jen Molnar. She's one of my colleagues. And she worked for 5 years. We tell people we work for 3 years because we want to think that we're fast, but it really took a long time. So 10 scientists working for at least 3 years to pull all this information together. Now, talking about information, don't worry, kids, it's not too bad. I'll go through this very quickly. I'm going to read each one. So the biggest problem with doing the Atlas was, guess what? It was getting the data, right? It was getting the data because the data existed in so many different places. And guess what? No one wanted to share that data. So scientists are really good at going out and collecting data, and they're really bad at sharing it because they think one day, eventually, they will publish it. Most of the time, it just sits there. And so one of the things our team had to do was, they were not just scientists, they were negotiators. They had to literally fly to places and convince people to put it all together for the common good. So for me, that was really the biggest breakthrough the Atlas does. It brings 70 partners all together in a way that they are willing to share global data for all our benefits and all their benefits as well. So big thanks to them. So that's all I wanted to really say about the Atlas and how we did it and the importance of it. You should know that every map on the Atlas today goes live on our website. And we're just, we were in discussions here with Google, and so we're going to work with you guys and the tools that you have to integrate our data and the Atlas data into the latest and greatest stuff that Google's providing. So this is just sort of the first step of getting it out there. Fair enough. I had nothing to do with it because if I did, I would have probably blown it. But Jen did and others did. So I'm going to talk to you about conservation now and how the Atlas has helped guide the conservation work we do. And I'm going to tell you 3 stories. That's basically it. And if you can remember one of them, that's great. So the first story I want to tell you is about deserts and conservation of deserts. Now, when you think about deserts, you mostly think about big, vast, open lands that are not really important. It turns out about a third of the world's surface are covered in deserts. And guess what? 1 billion people live in deserts. And most of them are really poor. So very, very high levels of poverty are in deserts. There's not a great way to make a living if you live in a desert. Recently, well, actually, a couple of years ago, I had the chance to go and do a journey that I've wanted to do for a long time. And that is walk across one of these deserts. And the desert that I walked across was the oldest and driest desert on the planet. And it's called the Namib. The Namib is a true old sand desert. It's been there forever and ever and ever. And there are few indigenous communities that still live there. And so we walked the Namib, but we walked it with camels because we needed something to carry our stuff. We couldn't carry all the water and all the food that we needed. Now, we couldn't ride these camels. This is a crucial mistake that we made. So we were so poor that we had to get second-hand camels to make this journey. And what we didn't realize in the fine print of buying a second-hand camel was they were not rideable. All right? So mistake number one is the second-hand camels could not be ridden. But we had, and so you see 6 camels here. We actually started with 8. But one got eaten by a lion before the journey even began. So that was done with that camel. He went very happily, don't worry kids. And the second one got pregnant. This is really true, actually. The third one actually developed a bit of a limp, and as you can see, he's not carrying anything. So the camels were carrying our stuff, and it took us about 20 days to go across this desert. Now, I'm doing this with these 4 guys, the African guys, and they run a small organization called Save the Rhino Trust. And even though they're a tiny group, they're in charge of doing conservation on an enormous piece of real estate. Basically, a desert twice the size of Yosemite National Park. Put it in perspective. Enormous, enormous landscapes. And these guys are the protectors of this landscape. Some of it's a national park. It's called the Skeleton Coast National Park. You can go and visit it. Some of it is not. It's just open land that still belongs to the community. If you want to get lost, good place to go. Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt went to have their kid over here, right? So it just kind of gives you an idea where it is. But these are the guys who took me on this walk. And they hadn't done this trip either. They were like, you want to go across the desert? Why do you want to do that? No one goes across the desert. So we did the first time that desert had ever been crossed on foot was our journey. And we had National Geographic come along. And there's a whole story about it, but I won't go into that. I want to point out one little thing. These guys are the sole providers for their communities. They're the guys who wear that uniform, threadbare as it is, with pride. They make a little bit of money from the few tourists who come there, and they take that money back into their village. They make about $100 a month. But when they go into their communities, and I've gone into communities with them, they are the big men in town. So they take their job very seriously, and they care about this place very much. And what do they care about, especially at this place? Well, they care about this animal. Do you know what that is? Rhino. What kind of rhino? No, it's not a white rhino, it's a black rhino. Great. It's a black rhino. And there's only 3,500 black rhinos on the planet. And the best population of black rhinos on the planet lives here. It lives in Namibia. It's the only place that black rhinos are free-ranging. They can just walk out there on landscape and not in a national park. That's an astonishing thing. And here's the more amazing thing. There's never been a poaching incident of black rhinos in Namibia in the last 15 years. And that's amazing because each of those rhino horns will bring you about $60,000. That's a lot of money. So there's a lot of pressure on rhinos. South Africa's lost rhinos. Zimbabwe's lost rhinos. Kenya's lost rhinos. Namibia, 0. And it's all because of this guy who's sitting next to me, and he's actually telling me, pick your tree, man, pick your tree. Because this rhino, by the name of Speedy, and that's the real name of this rhino, is about to charge us. That's really what he told me. He's like, pick your tree. Pick your tree. And I'm looking around. I'm like, all right. So one thing happened on this journey that I want to tell you about, which was kind of amazing. So we're on this walk, and we're going down this long journey. And all of a sudden, out in the horizon, far, far away, I see this little white dot. And this white dot kind of attracts us, and flat land like that. And all of a sudden, the whole team starts kind of moving towards it. This is on the very last day of our journey, by the way. We're one day from the ocean. We'd been on the road walking for about 19 days. And we had finished most of our food, particularly there was no more protein left. So we were on sort of maize diet, really just carbohydrates. And for us, we can handle it. We've got a little body fat. But for the Africans, they craved that protein. They wanted the meat. No meat for a long time. And you saw the whole line sort of turn towards this white dot. And pretty soon, we're all standing there. And everyone was wondering what I had in my box. We're standing around an egg. It's not the same egg, by the way. But an egg, and it's like this on the ground. And pretty soon, all of us are crowding around it just like this, and we're amazed. Do you know what kind of egg this is? It's an ostrich egg, right. So an ostrich had laid this egg. And they're ostriches, they'll lay them, they'll come back, they'll lay more, or they'll abandon the egg. We don't know. But we're in a national park now, in the Skeleton Coast National Park. And in a national park, you're not supposed to do what? You're not supposed to take anything or touch anything, right? And we didn't. We took pictures, we looked, we oohed and ahed at it. It was kind of an amazing thing. This egg perfectly placed out there in the middle of the desert. Again, this is not the same egg. But then we all picked up our backpacks and started walking off. And I looked back, and the 4 African dudes who were with me, they're still looking at the egg. And they're all like in a circle. And they speak this clicking language. They click away. You know, it's a clicking tongue, like the San Bushman. If you see that movie, Gods Must Be Crazy, they do that clicking, like that. And they're clicking away at this thing. And I can't really understand Damara, which is the language they're speaking, but I pretty much understand. I wonder if there's actually a Google translator for Damara. But get to work on that. But if there was, this is what they were saying. They're probably saying, distract the white guys, gather some sticks, and we'll have a 24-egg omelet in a heartbeat. We didn't say anything. We kept walking. And I looked back, and what was amazing is each of these guys picked up their camel and kept walking. And pretty soon, that egg is out there on its own. And as we did this journey, it kind of struck me that even though they're very, very poor, and they are in a completely different economic class than I am, for them, that still represents something that is important to conserve. For them, that's their source of livelihood. That's what they do. And they took their job, even in the middle of nowhere, no one's watching them, incredibly seriously. I thought that that kind of ethic could only be possible in countries once you've reached a certain income level. And what I saw that day out in Namibia really changed my mind about the ability of local communities to embrace concepts that I really thought were for the well-off and privileged. All right. My second story, I'm going to take you somewhere else. Let's see where we go. And those are forests of the world, tropical forests in particular. So we're going to go to Borneo. We're going to go to a forest up here called the Wahia Forest. And Borneo is a really neat place. It has lots and lots of forests, but the forests are under a great deal of threat. They're in threat from palm oil. Oil palms are planted in huge plantations, and that creates an enormous, enormous problem for the forest there. One of the problems that happens is as the wet soil dries up, it releases huge amounts of carbon dioxide. The cutting of these native forests allows Indonesia to be ranked in the top 5 countries for releasing greenhouse, which then contributes, of course, to climate change, as you all know. Forest burning is a big, big deal for us. But it's very hard to find because palm oil is very lucrative. If you go home and you look through your cabinet, look at the stuff that you have, palm oil is in nearly everything. Like you'll find it in Chip Ahoy cookies, you'll find it in soap, you'll find it in all kinds of products you have right now in your cupboard. And it's not native to Indonesia. Most of it comes from Asia. It's actually native to West Africa. It's brought over. All right. So saving these forests is really important. But you don't find a lot of saved forests when you go out to Indonesia. But this forest, you do. It's an amazing place, the Wahia Forest. So I went out there and you see lots of wildlife. You see orangutans like that, and you see lots of great birds. But then when you come to the edge of the forest, you see this. You see these big totem poles, very scary looking. They're very tall, and they have this warrior on it with some sort of bird or animal on the top, and pretty scary. And they're always looking outwards. They're always looking out of the forest, not inwards. And they're basically warning posts that are telling people, don't come into this forest. Danger. This is our forest. Stay away from this forest. And when you go into the Wahia forest, it is pretty intact. I mean, you see lots of wildlife there. And I was surprised how this forest survived when all else around it is just a blight zone. I mean, everything else is just blitzed. Why has this forest survived? And what do these poles, these totem poles, have to do with it? What's the Wahia forest about? How come it's protected? And he says, oh, you got to talk to the chief of the Wahia. Great, let's go see the chief. Now, to see the chief, you got to get in the car, and you got to drive back out of the forest, and you got to go about 40 miles. Now, that 40-mile journey literally takes a day because the roads are so bad, and you go through this burnt-out ag land and burnt-out trees, and you eventually get to this village. And in the village, you meet the chief. And this is Chief Tak, who's sitting here. He's a Wahia. He's a Dayak tribesman. And this is a colleague of mine from the Nature Conservancy who's translating for me. And I, make all the pleasant small talk, how you doing? And he tells me about how wonderful the forest is and why it's so important and how when he lived in the forest it was all very much cooler than it is now where he lives and all this sort of stuff. So the big question came to me and I said, well, if you love the forest so much, why do you live out here in this village? I mean, why aren't you living in the forest? And he didn't quite understand what I said. And Eric, my colleague, had to retranslate again and said, why don't you live in the forest? Why are you living in this village half a day or a day drive away from the forest? And then he kind of looked at me puzzled and he said, oh, no, I've always lived here. It's the forest that's moved. And that's when it sort of struck me that their forest, when he was a kid, the forest was right around him. That village had never moved. The forest had just moved because it's been logged all the way up there. So then the obvious next question was, well, why have you protected this forest? And here's what he said to me. Because I was asking, well, are you going to do some ecotourism there? Are you going to try to capture some carbon credits? I'm thinking, like how do you make money out of this? How do you pump it back into the system? How do you make it sustainable? And he said, no, we're not doing anything. We're not even hunting there anymore. We're just leaving it alone. And it's a big forest, a 100,000 acre plus forest. Why? Well, he said, once the forest goes, we no longer are the Wahia people. For us, our entire identity is around that forest. When that forest disappears, we will just be a Dayak. And then we'll just be another Indonesian, like all the other Indonesian tribes out there. For us to be the Wahia people, we have to have the Wahia forest. And for him and his community, it had entirely to do with sovereignty. And that was a really new thing for me to think about, conservation for sovereignty. I hadn't thought about that. I hadn't thought that people's identity could be so linked that they would want to protect a place because it made sense to them because that's who they were, right? So that's my story about Indonesia and the forest that I went to. And Chief Tak, by the way, just won a big prize from the Indonesian president, the highest environmental award to be given in Indonesia. He just received it for his work and his community's work of protecting this forest, not because it was giving them money, but because it defined who they were as a community. The last story I want to tell you guys is a marine story. And this one's about economics. So I told you about conservation ethics, I told you about sovereignty, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about economics. And I'm going to take you to, what's this map of? Coral reefs, great. So the lighter it is, the less intense the diversity of reefs are. So that's Hawaii, for example. That's the Caribbean. But look at this place. Look how dark the color is. So that's the Coral Triangle. And the Coral Triangle is the world's most diverse spot on Earth. There's more species in the Coral Triangle than any other place on the planet. And of course, when you go underwater, you see enormous varieties of fish. You also see lots of cool things like this guy. I had to throw that up there. That's a pygmy seahorse. And that pygmy seahorse is about the size of my little fingernail. Not my little finger, my little fingernail. And it's an adult pygmy seahorse. It lives on these sea fans. It's pretty hard to find. You've got to go right up to it and look really carefully, and then you'll find some of them. It also has big fish there. So not just diverse fish, but it's one of the few places left in Asia where you can still find big sharks and big groupers and things like that. We're actually catching that shark, but we're catching it in the non-traditional way. Talk about fishing. So I was asked to go and take part in a tagging operation with sharks. And they said, well, we're going to catch over 100 sharks and put a tag on them and then release them to find out where they go and how they live. And I thought, well, great, I love fishing, so we'd catch these things in the traditional way, which had to do with a line and a rod or something like that and a hook. But no, we were going to not hurt these sharks. So the way we were going to do it, it was swim up to them very quietly when they were feeding. I'm not making this up. And then we were going to put a rope around their tail. And then the question is, well, then what? Well, then you try to stay away from the pointy end. But that's literally how we caught these sharks. So we caught actually over 110 sharks, several species, and we tagged them to find out where they were going and how they were using the area. We also caught some bigger sharks like tiger sharks. And those ones, we actually managed to put cameras on them. And the cameras stay with them for 6 to 8 hours, and then they release, and the camera comes to the surface. And you have videotape of the shark looking through the environment through its own eyes. But because we didn't use hooks, we didn't hurt the sharks, as soon as we released them, they would go back to doing what they like doing, which is looking for food. All right, so anyway, should show you that. But in addition to all this amazing wildlife that's in the Coral Triangle, of course, there's also people. There's 30 million people making a living out of sea, out of fish, right? And they all live here. So one place in particular that I want to focus on is the Solomon Islands. So the Solomon Islands are these amazing chain of islands, and I can tell you lots and lots of stories about the Solomons, but I won't do it right now. I'll give you two little points of interest. So the last headhunters of Asia lived in the Solomons. You know, these are people who really went around scaring other people away, essentially from the coast, because they wanted to protect the resources. It was also the last place that a Japanese surrendered to an American after World War II. And it was guess when it was? It was 1967. Because there was a Japanese soldier who had hid out in the Solomon Islands. It's a great place to hide out. They had to actually fly over and drop letters from his mother telling him that the war was over. It should have been over for 25 years, and that he should consider surrendering, which thankfully he did. It's also where President Kennedy swam to shore when his PD-109 got bombed. And there's a swim in the Solomons that I have done. It's called the Kennedy Mile. And the Kennedy Mile is a very fast swim, because there's, of course, lots of sharks around. But they drop you off and you swim to the island that Kennedy, it's called Plum Island now, the island that he came up on. It's a great place. It's 2,000 islands spread, 1,000 islands spread over 2 million square kilometers of ocean. Right? So really fantastic. But I told you about headhunters. The Solomons also has the highest diversity of languages, one of the highest on the planet. There's over 100 languages spoken in the Solomons. Imagine taking language class there. 100 different languages and only 500,000 people. And because everyone has their own tribal customs, there's a lot of conflict between communities. And what do they fight about? Well, they fight about fish. So there were two big communities, and they were at war with one another. And I mean, when I say war with one another, they were really at war with one another. They were burning each other's houses. They were, threatening one another in very serious sort of ways. And through the work of the Nature Conservancy, but also because of an enlightened leader, a local leader in this community, they created a marine protected area between these two islands. So they took one piece of ocean, and they actually said it was taboo. That was the word they used. The word taboo is actually a Solomon word. It's actually pronounced tambu. And it means don't go there, keep out, stay away. And what happened when we created this protected area? When we created this protected area, the protected area is about 110 square kilometers in size. It allowed fish to breed. It allowed all the marine life that had been fished out everywhere else to breed and grow. And as they bred and grew, they swam out, and then the communities could each harvest the overspill, if you like. We call it fish banks. So when we go out there, we don't talk about marine protected areas. No one wants to hear that. But when we say fish banks, people go, oh, what's that? Well, here's how it works. It's like a saving bank, but it's for fish. And if both of you agree on this bank, it'll allow us to protect the whole area. Now, the question is, does it work? So this little girl, for example, has harvested these animals, which are actually sea slugs. And they're sold in East Asia, dried. And just these 3 sea slugs will pay her tuition for 1 semester. And just to give you an idea, it really does work because it's a little bit of money, but it makes a huge difference to local communities. So we helped set up this incredible marine protected area, and if any of you ever get to go to the Solomons, it is worth seeing this place. It's called the Anravans Marine Community Conservation Area. But if you go there, you will see all the big fish I told you about. You will see sea turtles and manta rays and big sharks, more sharks than you've seen anywhere else, almost anywhere else on the planet. And you can see that you see giant clams that are still giant. So it really just, the diversity of life is great. Well, so what? We're the Nature Conservancy. We're supposed to protect nature. Of course the wildlife's going to do well. How about the people? So a few years ago, we went and did something, frankly, not enough conservationists do. We went and measured the impact of our work on the local communities. So we did a survey of about 2,200 people. I think it was 230 households that were surveyed. And we asked them basically simple economic survey questions. How well are they doing? Guess what? Their income had doubled in that period. Had doubled. Not just gone up a little bit, had doubled. And we used multiple measures of well-being, from how many kids are going to school, how diversified is the economy, how are the women doing. They tend to be the marginalized people in society. So we measured in lots of different ways. We found the same result. So not only did wildlife do well, but people were doing better as well. All because they now had this fish bank that allowed them to harvest resources that were coming out of it. Only one data slide, and it's one before my last slide. I'll just show that to you, just to give you an idea. So the pink line there, or the purple line, is communities that are associated with a marine protected area. And the dark blue or black line are communities that don't have a marine protected area. And you can see, look at income, for example, between communities that don't have marine protected areas and that do. It's essentially a doubling in size. Or look at this, fish catch. It's not actually fish catch. It's actually one type of marine product, and it's called trochus. The trochus shell is very valuable. It's, if you ever go to Savile Row, if you're James Bond and you go to Savile Row in England and you get a really nice shirt, one of the options you'll get asked is whether you want a trochus shell button. And if you get a trochus shell button, it's probably coming from the Solomons. Notice that it's 0 everywhere else, but here 6% of the households still are able to go and harvest that. So it makes a big difference. So here's how I want to end this talk. When you think about conservation, to you and I, it's about saving wildlife. But when you go outside of, frankly, the Bay Area or other really well-to-do places, it becomes about much more than that. It really becomes about ways of life. It'll become about health. It'll become about security, economic well-being. It takes on all different tones. And I can tell you stories for all those examples where health and conservation are linked, or when economic benefits and conservation are linked. That, I think, is the future of the environmental movement. As long as we just talk about cool animals, we're only going to attract people like you. But when we start talking about what this can do to people's real lives, then we can start doing conservation at really big scales. 2 million acres, 20 million acres, big, big stuff. We can't do the big stuff unless we could get other people to join in with us. And that's the key. That's the key, how we talk to people who currently we consider the enemy. They're not the enemy. They're just people just like you and I trying to live a better life. And if we can show them a different way that connects their livelihood to the environment, we can make it happen. So here's how I want to end this talk. Think of this little thing. As long as humans have been on this planet, we have only been able to see the planet from eye level, essentially. For 3.5 million years, we've walked around and we've looked at the planet like this. If you go to Tanzania, there's a place called Lautoli. It's a really cool place in Tanzania. It's where you see these old hominid footprints. They're this size, and there's 2 of them, and they walk parallel to one another. And they're 3.5 million years old. The first evidence of humans standing upright, or hominids, early primates, standing upright and walking. One was a male, probably, and one was a female. We can tell because of the size of the footprint. And one probably carried a baby because the female has a slight tilt to her, and which means she was probably having a baby on her hip or somewhere on her. And as these footprints go, they stop for a minute and they turn slightly as if they're looking at something in the distant. A moment of doubt, the first expression of doubt in humanity recorded on the rocks. What was the doubt about? What were they looking? Were they looking at danger? Was there something out there like a lion or something they were worried about? Or was it opportunity? Maybe there was a dead animal or food or water source. right? We have only seen the planet from eye level. And how far can we see? Well, if you're an ordinary human and you're standing on flat ground, you can see about 10 miles. I think it's 6.5, something like that. 6.5 to 10 miles, and then the Earth's horizon curves around. Then, in one generation, our generation, my generation, and your generation, right? We see the entire planet all at once. Think about that. I mean, it's just actually stunning, right? 3.5 million years, we've been locked to one way of viewing the world, and then all of a sudden, we take it for granted. I mean, especially kids in the audience, I mean, they really take it for granted. Of course we see the whole planet. So what are we going to do with that knowledge? 40 years from now, we didn't know what we were doing to the entire planet. And I truly believe that 40 years from now, Earth Day is 40 years old today, so 40 years from now, I think it'll be too late. The biggest changes we wanted to make, it would be too late to make those changes. The animals you wanted would be gone. We wouldn't have the services that people depend on. So right now, we're in this narrow margin. Of course you would want to be born right now. This is the best time to be born. This is the most opportune time to be born. Because we're the ones who will see the worst, but really have the opportunity to do the most. So that's kind of what I wanted to let you go with. But I wanted to tell you one last thing about this little egg. So you remember I told you, we left the egg behind and we walked off. Well, that night we came to the ocean. And we camped up there. And some of these African guys I've been with had never seen the sea before. Namibia has no standing water at all. Think about it. And all of a sudden you're seeing the ocean. That's like seeing planet Earth for the first time, really, right? So there they are on the ocean. Everyone's celebrating. We're all taking a bath. It's great. The next morning, a brand new Cessna Caravan comes and lands on the beach. Beautiful plane, bounces down the runway, stops. We all pile in. Brand new plane, leather seats, air conditioning for the first time. Someone opens up a Coca-Cola and hands it to me. I'm not big into sugary drinks, but it felt really good, right? So I took that first sip. It's great. Door shuts, plane revs up, goes bouncing down the sand, it takes off. As it's taking off, I look out the window. And guess who's waving at me? My 4 African guides and the camels. They're waving as we're taking off. See, my little expedition is over, but they don't get to go in the plane with the camels. They have to turn those things around, right? And walk right back across the desert, back to where we started. And of course, in that moment, we realized that by evening, they were going to reach the egg. And none of us were going to be around. And the interesting thing is the entire plane erupted in a conversation about what they would do then, when we are not around watching. Which makes me realize that all conservation, no matter where you do it, whether you do it in Tahoe, as you saw in the paper today, or whether you do it in Namibia, whether you do it in Morro Bay off the coast of California, or whether you do it in Indonesia, all conservation is local. And ultimately, the sustainability of conservation will only happen if local communities embrace it. We will always be foreigners and guests in their land. As soon as our little money ends, they will have to step up and take over it. The amazing thing is we don't really know what they would do. I frankly might have eaten it. Don't put that in. I don't know. But the question was that we didn't either, and it was a legitimate debate we had. I actually think they would probably left it alone and kept walking. That's what those guys are like. But the point is that when our eyes are turned, how will they take care of the planet? Thank you very much.
So we have plenty of time for questions. If some of you want to get up and leave, please feel free to do that. Just try to be quiet. But I'm sure there are questions in the audience, and we'll take them for Sanjayan. That was a great talk. Anybody have any questions?
I had a question about back on the Solomon Islands data, you showed data after you had implemented the marine protected area versus areas that didn't have marine protected area.
Yeah.
Do you have data of the place that had later a marine protected area before it had the marine protected area?
Great question. And the truth of the matter is we don't have it at the level we want it at. We do have some, but not enough. So very clever. I knew you would catch something like that. Good catch. The problem is most conservationists don't do a good job of measuring the impact of their work because we do God's work. We do good stuff. Why do we, that's a genuine fault with us. You don't think about that, and it's a systematic fault with how we think about conservation. So in the Solomon's case, we do have some, but the real sample we had were communities that had it and communities that didn't. I see where you're going with it. We're doing a bigger study there right now.
Here you go. Here's a question right here. Do you want to stand up and ask your question?
How are salamanders surviving like these days? Because they need like a special habitat. So like, do their habitats get destroyed every once in a while? Like,
great question. So how are salamanders and I'd say amphibians and frogs doing? So they're not doing very well because most things like frogs and amphibians and toads need both land and water to survive. So you can't just protect land, you also have to protect water. And water pollution is a really big problem with pesticides and things like that. So most of them aren't doing that well. But there are some that are doing pretty well. In California, you have a really great salamander called the tiger salamander. It's a really big salamander, and he's got spots, and he kind of looks like a tiger. Next to you, if you pick him up, which you shouldn't really do, but if you do, he'll croak at you. He'll go rah like that, like a little tiger. It's pretty cool. And that salamander is actually doing really well because, well, they're doing well in some places because we're working with farmers and landowners to really protect the grasslands that salamander needs to live in. So the Nature Conservancy and other local land trusts are working all over California to protect that salamander, the tiger salamander.
You talked about the fish bank in Solomon Islands. And
yeah.
You explained how the locals there prefer to think of it as a fish bank as opposed to conservancy. It seems to me that argument would be true pretty much anywhere in the developed world as well. Have you had success in trying to replicate that for cod or various other fishes?
We've had tremendous success with that argument of using banks as a catchphrase to talk about a collective resource the community can draw on in times of trouble. So not only do we have fish banks, we also now have grass banks that are grassland areas that the community agrees to set aside for wildlife. Like in northern Kenya, we are doing enormous projects there where we're setting aside huge grass banks, as well as in the United States, California, Arizona, places like that, where the community says, we're going to leave this for wildlife, but in times of drought, when everyone's rushing to sell their cattle and so all the cattle prices deflate, we can go in there and graze it in that time. And it's a very attractive argument to poor communities who constantly go through boom and bust cycles of have, and then then no rain, then all cattle are dying, then everyone's selling at the same time. With fish banks, we have, and lots of different kinds of things. One really cool thing we're doing right here off the coast of California, just south of here, is basically buying trawler permits and taking a lot of the trawlers that are having the biggest harm on certain areas out of business. So we own the licenses, the Nature Conservancy does, but then we put them back out and just give it to them under conditions where they can fish more sustainably using line methods, for example, and then keeping them out of the most sensitive areas as well. So there's a lot of really clever stuff going on where we're trying to engage with economic interests to not put them out of business, but to use our might and our dollars to steer it in a different direction.
Here you go.
How many pounds of food did you need for the walk across the desert?
And what's your name?
Anika.
Anika. Oh, great. How old are you, Anika?
9.
You're 9. Oh, I have a niece just like you. She's 8. And she asked me how many pounds of food I ate on my walk across the desert. You know, the food wasn't, the truth of the answer is I don't know how many pounds of food we had because we didn't pack like that. We just thought about, you know, you think about it in cups, like so we each would have 1 cup of this thing that looks like porridge. And then like 1 can of like tomato, which you'd put on top, and maybe a can of sardines that you'd throw on top of that and eat that for dinner. So we didn't think of it in pounds. I will tell you, for water, which is the real issue, because you can last without food for very long, water, we were each using about 7 liters of water a day. That's 7 bottles, big bottles of water every day. That's for everything. That's for showering quickly, that's for brushing my teeth, that's for drinking, you know, and that's for cooking. And just to give you an idea, that's how much we used every day for 20 days. If you are in West Africa, you would use about 35 liters of water a day. You know how much Americans use? Here, you know how much I use in America?
Want to make a guess? I don't know.
700 liters of water a day. 700. So that means we're probably wasting a lot of it, don't you think?
Any other questions? Oh, here.
I won't tell you how old I am. So this takes lots of money. How does the Nature Conservancy fund these projects?
It's a great question. So the Nature Conservancy gets most of its money from individual donors. We have about 1 million members around the world, and they send in from $50 memberships to much, much bigger than that. We also get a chunk of money from foundations that support it, many of them in the Bay Area. Moore Foundation, Hewlett-Packard, all those foundations give the Conservancy money to do it. And then there's a small amount of money that we use where we leverage government money to get something big done. So that's how the Conservancy, it raises money the old-fashioned way through members like you and like others like you.
That wasn't a real egg, was it?
Huh?
That thing you were shaking was not a real egg.
It is a real egg. What do you think I'm doing? Like faking these kids out? Yeah.
Is it going to survive?
Here, pass it. No. It's, look, I've eaten what's inside it.
Okay.
Here, let's go show him, because I don't think you believe it.
No, it was like you were shaking it so much. I was like,
yeah, that ostrich. No, that ostrich. No, it was an unfertilized egg from an ostrich that I actually personally knew.
Oh, okay.
It's actually true. It's one lonely female that lives on a farm.
I really appreciated you drawing a link between conservation and health and people living better lives. And you gave us really great examples of how people who live with very little means do that. How can we draw that connection in our own communities and perhaps in our own country where people live with great means and I think don't make that connection?
You know, so here's the way to do this. I've had a struggle with it, and it's very hard to talk about conservation to people who don't think maybe just like us. So you have to use whatever words, whatever language you can to talk about something that has real meaning to their lives. You know, Rachel Carson, 40 years ago, she took on the pesticide industry and broke them. I mean, she got DDT banned, one woman. And she did that by talking to other women living, talking directly to, women in their kitchens back in the 60s, talking to them about health and safety for their kids. So she said, look, if the songbirds aren't singing out there in the woods, do you really want your kids playing out there? If the songbirds are dying, do you really want your kids out on the grass lawn? I think that the problem with conservation right now, this is my generation that we did this. We started talking about biodiversity, and biodiversity became this all-encompassing thing. And, we said you go into a forest or you go into a coral reef, and the diversity of life blows us away. And because it blows us away, and listen, no apologies, I live in Montana. I live in Montana because I want to live in a place where there's a big animal that could potentially kill me when I go for a walk. I like that sort of stuff. But I'm a pretty rare individual when it comes to the grand scheme of things. So the truth of the matter is, this notion that nature is out there and it should be protected in all its glory, almost like a cathedral, I think is a bit false. We have thought so much about, what we need to do more is think about how to integrate people in it, talking about not nature from people, but nature for people. And you can do it in simple ways. You can talk about energy efficiencies in the Bay Area. That is definitely within reach of everyone here. Early adopters, right? Or you talk about how water goes into the bay. You could talk about food you eat, where you're getting that food from. Does make a difference.
One more question maybe before
right
we
next
wrap
to you,
up?
I think.
Yep.
What's the biggest problem you run into when you're trying to create fish banks and other banks?
There are two problems. One is the issue that the gentleman talked about a little bit before. Conservation takes money. And when we talk about fish banks, we're talking about that in the Solomon Islands. Well, guess what? Most of our donors don't live there. They live here. People like to give to things that are in their own backyard. It's hard to get them to make that leap to someplace very, very far away. So you are really resource constrained when you do conservation in these faraway places. That's just the nature of the beast. So that's one issue. The second issue is gaining people's trust. So that's really hard. You should never promise something to people that you don't really want to stand behind. Doesn't mean you can't make a mistake, but you can't mislead them in any way at all. You have to be completely transparent. And if the numbers don't add up and you're just asking them to say, look, take a jump with me on this, then tell them that. But you can't fake it. It'll catch up with you. It'll catch up with you so fast, and it'll all blow up. And I've seen it happen in conservation over and over and over again. So you have to be really honest and transparent when you talk to local communities. You never talk down to people just because they speak a different language. Those Aboriginal people, they knew more about their environment than what you could find out on the internet today. They had this intimate understanding of it and appreciate that what they're bringing to the table is as valuable as what you're bringing to the table. It's just different scale. And then be honest and open when you're having discussions with them. That's the hardest challenge. Thank you guys so much.